So I'm Tina Fallon. As I mentioned, I'm not Victoria Alexander, but welcome to Buying into Brooklyn. And I've been working with Realty Collective for 17 years. It's a boutique real estate firm. And Victoria started it 18 years ago to defy the stereotypes associated with real estate in New York. And we designed this workshop to outline the buying process in Brooklyn. It is not comprehensive. It's going to be fast. There's going to be a lot of information, but we're not going to get through all of it. New York is different from every other place in many ways. That's why we all live here. But it means that buying real estate here is also really idiosyncratic. And if you've never done it before, it can be overwhelming. So we're just going to give you a good place to start today. And we offer this workshop freely so that you have this information at your fingertips. You can make educated decisions about who you want to work with and how you want to proceed. And we feel like you want to share this information as widely as possible because there's sometimes scary sales tactics that are used to frighten you into working with people that you might not be the best people for the job. We just want to try to dispel that fear as we go. We want you to feel empowered. We want you to feel educated. And this is the biggest investment you'll make in your life. We want you to make sure you're making the right decision for yourself and that you're hiring experts who you trust and who are going to guide you and help you avoid making costly mistakes. So we're just going to go through the basics and then we'll get you on your journey and provide you with some of the tools that you need. More to come. Also, so Farah is behind the scenes here. She's launched a poll. And if you don't mind answering those questions, that'll help us do our market research, get to know where everyone is at in the process. So there's the poll. I'm going to minimize the poll so that I don't get distracted by it. So again, I'm Tina Fallon, real estate agent, but I want to introduce you to the rest of our dream team, Lisa Yanchi and Rashida Siddiq. So Lisa is a mortgage broker, Rashida is a real estate attorney, and we've all been working together for a long time, maybe 50 deals we've done together. It is important to work with people that we trust. We also really like working with strong women and people who, are there, have been in the trenches with us and who we know are going to really deliver for our clients. When time is of the essence, and I know Rashida and I have a closing. We had a closing today. We got another closing tomorrow. When the chips are down, you really want people you can trust, and these are people who we trust. So over to you, Rashida, and then Lisa.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rashida Siddiq. I am a real estate attorney. I have been practicing for now 20 official years as of April. Can't believe it went by that fast. But my office is located downtown Brooklyn, but I'm also licensed in New Jersey. I represent clients that are buying in all of the boroughs, including also in Nassau County, Suffolk County, Westchester, and Rochester. Representing lots of first-time buyers. I liken this to kind of like a roller coaster. I'm here to give you, the legal aspect, what you should be preparing yourself for, and as you start this process. So I look forward to giving giving further information. Pass to Lisa.
Hey everybody, my name's Lisa. I am a mortgage loan officer at Cross Country Mortgage. I've been doing this for about 10 years. I really enjoy it. I love helping first-time home buyers. This is probably the biggest purchase you have ever made in your life. And you're going to have a lot of questions. And it's my job to answer them and to make you understand, what you're getting involved in and then to get you to the closing table. Cross Country Mortgage, we are a private mortgage bank, which means we work just like the big banks, but all we do is mortgages. I think really what makes us stand out is just that we have a real wide variety of products. So we can really figure out the best loan for you rather than fitting you into that 1 30-year or 7-year arm that we have. And I can do loans all over the country, and I have, but my focus, about 90% of my business is New York City, condos, co-ops, single family, multifamily, Westchester, New Jersey, and Connecticut. Those are sort of my big areas, with the city being the biggest focus. So really excited to be here and to answer your guys' questions.
Okay, great. So we'll go through what our different roles are. My role is, in this case, I represent you as a buyer's broker. So buyer's broker is a coach. It costs nothing for you. The buyer's broker is still legally paid by the seller. So it costs you nothing to have somebody representing you. And that's important because you have it's expert free advice to you. And as a first-time home buyer, you want everybody in your team watching out for your fiduciary interest. The owner of the property has hired a broker for them. We're the broker who represents you as a buyer. So we act as matchmakers, therapists, a sounding board, whatever it takes to help you get into your new Brooklyn home. And it is, as Rashida said, it's a roller coaster. It's emotional, it is stressful, and we're really here to try to make it as easy as possible. It's never easy, but we try to make it as smooth, pleasant, and transparent as possible so that you feel in control as you go through this process. So it is such a strange and wonderful thing. I too, like Lisa, really love working with first-time home buyers. When I was a first-time home buyer, I didn't have a broker representing me, and I felt like I was just teaching myself as I went. And I can't believe now that I ever went through that without somebody who was representing me on my side. And I just think the fact that those services are free to you, obviously you don't need to work with us, but work with a broker if as a buyer. Sometimes people think that it's not, that it isn't worth it, but it's really worth it to have somebody on your side. So we're here and we get you started in the process, but the other people you need to have assembled are your real estate attorney and your mortgage broker. So having more buyer's agent is important because our fiduciary responsibility is to you. We do really encourage you to interview multiple people. Please interview us if you're like, but find somebody who makes you feel comfortable, who respects you, and has a communication style that matches yours. I think that's really important. You don't ever want to feel like, I was texting you all night, why didn't you get back to me? And the person says, oh, because we only communicate via email or via this app or something like that. We really want to match your style when it comes to that and guide you through the whole thing. We're not everybody's cup of tea, I will say, but we have great relationships with our clients, and they become our friends as we go through this process. It's a really intimate relationship, and you should be working with somebody who you feel really confident with. And I think you should do that with each of the people in your team. These are people who are, like Lisa and Rashida, are obviously seasoned professionals, but they also should be people whose vibe you enjoy. Like, you're going to spend a lot of time talking to these people, and make sure you pick somebody who, like, when you see their phone number come up on your phone, you're not like, oh, don't do that. Okay, so that said, we're going to move along into why buy now, which I think is a really good question in the market that we're in right now. So as ever in New York City, the rent is too damn high. I mean, it just is. And it keeps going up. Even as mortgages get more expensive, the rent just keeps tracking alongside of it. Other reasons people buy is because you want to be able to design your own home. You're tired of living in some anodyne or garbagey landlord run home. You want to be able to invest and build equity in your own place. And in New York City, what we found is that real estate tends to be a really stable long-term investment. It's not necessarily, it's very expensive to purchase, so it's not a great short-term purchase usually, but over the long term, it is a great way to build equity and to build long-term wealth and stability. And all of that is something that, if you live in a world that's as chaotic as ours, having that kind of stability, I think, is even in times when mortgage rates are high, it is meaningful to be in your own home. But that said, buying is not for everybody. We have a rent versus buy matrix that we will link you to that I think is a really useful tool. You put in your numbers. It's from the New York Times. No, and I'm plugging for the New York Times. My husband works there. This is like little times thing. But it's actually a really useful interactive tool. Renting is a totally acceptable way to live in New York City. The majority of New York City residents are renters, and it is not right for everybody at all times. So I believe in homeownership, but I also think it's not for everybody. And if it's not for you, homeownership can just be a bummer. So we don't want to push anybody into buying if it's not the right time for them. So do go through the link and fill it out. It's kind of a fun tool. But the basics that you'll go through involve sort of, are you planning on holding the property for at least 5 years? And that's one of the things that we look at is in terms of just recouping all of the opportunity costs and allowing for inflation to kind of catch up. If you know you're going to be moving in the next 3 years, we'll still go through the process with you, but it is possible that it is not a smart investment unless it's something that you're then going to be able to hold as an investment property once you move. So let's talk about assembling your team. So the previously mentioned big three, plus you will be, depending on what kind of property you're looking to purchase, you want to have these people. You definitely want to have an inspector. We recommend that we do an inspection for every property, even co-ops. Sometimes people say, oh, you don't need to inspect a co-op. We think it's a great way. It costs some money, but it does give you a kind of owner's manual for your home, for your appliances. You may have, it's just useful to know how much longer you have left on your hot water heater, for example. And it's just a great way to get oriented towards the home. So, so definitely an inspector. If you're looking to do some work, it's great to have a contractor, possibly an architect lined up. They get very busy. So you want to have those conversations maybe even before you start looking, especially if it's something where you're going to have to begin the work right away. And then there are other people that we may need, and it would be great if I could see this but my eye surgery is so I can't see the rest of the slide. Who else are we looking for? Oh no, we did it. Okay, so definitely factor in lead time. You don't want to be interviewing these people at the same time as you're, say, negotiating a deal on a home. It's really good to have it lined up. We have lots of lists of people who our clients have enjoyed working with in the past, but it's good to interview other people as well, your friends, anybody who's been through a renovation, etc. And then once you have your team and you're ready to move forward, here's what happens next. So the big number one, you can talk to us first. We're happy to talk to you, but we're going to send you right back to get your mortgage pre-approval. That is the most important thing. Sellers will not take you seriously if you don't have a mortgage pre-approval. So, and a mortgage broker is going to talk you through what your different options are. So you know how much money you're going to put down. You understand where you're at with your credit score. If you're interested in an FHA loan, those kinds of things. So I will pass to Lisa, who can take you through in a more in-depth way the mortgage process.
For sure. So yes, the first thing you want to do is you want to get pre-approved. And the reason you want to do that is because you want to know what your buying power is. You don't want to waste time looking at things that are totally above your budget, because that's not really fun. And you also don't want to maybe undersell what you could potentially afford mortgage-wise if you wanted to, right? So, so the first thing we're going to do when we talk about getting you pre-approved is it's actually a pretty personal process, because I'm going to ask you a lot of questions. I'm going to ask about your work history. I'm going to ask about what you think you want to buy. I'm going to ask about how much you think you're going to put down, where you think those funds are coming from. All of these questions help me figure out the right program for you. And like I mentioned earlier, you know, we probably have over 80 or 90 programs. So I can really figure out what's going to be the right fit for what both works. I am going to get some documents from you. I'm going to get some W-2s, some tax returns if you're self-employed, pay stubs. All of that is to help compose the financial picture of what you are pre-approved for. And then you'll fill out an application through our secure portal. I'll run your credit, and then I will get you that pre-approval. The pre-approval is really a working draft. So as you start to look at things with Tina or Victoria, we can fine tune that pre-approval to what you end up actually buying. It really is like a living document, but it gives you a really good guide of the parameters for your search. In terms of programs, so FHA is a very common program. It's a government program. It allows as little as 3.5% down. It's usually not the best route to go for a condo because a lot of condos don't allow FHA. Co-ops definitely won't. But if you're buying a single or a multifamily, it's a very good option because it allows you to put less down. You also have other ways of putting less down that are conventional programs. These allow you to put 10, even 5% down, and then you have private mortgage insurance, which will come up, excuse me, which will come off automatically when you have 80% equity in the property. In New York, there's a very cool New York State first-time home buyers program. We are one of their preferred lenders, and it's a really cool program because it allows you to put as little as 3% down, and you get 3% of the purchase price up to $15,000 that can be used for down payment and closing costs. So in effect, that 3% is basically free money. There are rules to this program. You have to be a first-time home buyer. You have to meet the income limitations of that program, which can go anywhere from 128 to 186 a year, 186,000 a year, depending on your household size. You have to live in the property. So these are the things that sort of, when I ask questions for you, that might be a very good option for a great program that gives you help with down payment assistance. One of the sort of myths of, home ownership is that if you're self-employed, you can't get a mortgage. You 100% can get a mortgage when you're self-employed. I work with self-employed borrowers all the time. I am going to need to look at your taxes, and we are going to sort of talk about whether you have the buying power now, or maybe you have the buying power 2 years from now. A few things to keep in mind once you have that pre-approval. That pre-approval is based on the financial snapshot I have from our conversation and the documents you gave me. So if you change your job, if you get a new car, if you get a new student loan, those are things that your mortgage professional needs to know about, because that is going to change the status of your pre-approval. That doesn't mean you can't get a new job if you want to buy a home. You 100% can. But those are conversations we should have before you make that decision, just to know how it could affect your buying power. After that, as soon as you have that pre-approval, you will go out and start seeing things. And then again, we will fine tune that pre-approval based on what you find and what you end up falling in love with and want to put an offer on.
Right. So then we go out together and we start searching. But the other piece that you absolutely have to have is have in place before I prefer you to have this before we even really start looking for property, is a New York City real estate attorney. And make sure in all of these cases, you're hiring people who are experts in New York City. Your uncle may be a lawyer, probably not the best person for this. Rocket Mortgage seems like they're offering great rates. They don't know anything about New York. So, if you're buying a co-op, you don't want to use an app to do your financing. So those are, New York is very specific, and you can't just go to some kind of like one size fits all. So make
Tina,
sure
I actually maybe should just talk about rates for a second before we move
Oh,
on.
sure. Oh, yeah.
So I'm sure that's something you guys want to know about. So when we do the pre-approval, we're going to do that pre-approval based on rates right now. It's a little bit of a placeholder, because you might find something tomorrow, you might find something 6 months from now. What I can tell you is, we've been for almost over a year and a half in an increasing rate environment. The good news is that rates are starting to slowly go down. We're definitely not in the situation we were in like January, where rates were just going up, up, up. They're starting to slowly stabilize and now even go down a little bit, which is great. So I think we're reaching sort of the end of the inflation rate craziness. What I'm telling all of my borrowers right now is the rate that you have for your purchase is not going to be the rate you have for 30 years. It's probably not even going to be the rate you have for a year and a half. Because what's going to happen is once the recession is in full swing, which is what happens after an inflation, rates are going to go down. And then we're going to refinance you. So that's really how you have to think about rate right now, is that this is the rate that gets you the house. And then 100% once rates go down and it financially makes sense to refinance you, we will refinance you. And your closing costs for refinance are going to be substantially lower than for your purchase. And again, that's a conversation that we can have, but that's sort of how you need to sort of look at the rate environment right now.
Yeah, just from personal experience, the first home I ever bought, my mortgage was at 8%. And we felt really lucky to get that. And we were able to continuously refinance our loan as rates went down and reduce our monthly payment. So one of the things that makes this a good time to be a buyer is that you do have a lot of leverage as a buyer in this market. And there's a lot of negotiability in not every property, but there are properties out there with really negotiable purchase prices. You know, over the time you own the home, you never get to renegotiate your purchase price, but you can renegotiate your mortgage. So, you know, here we have a situation where a year ago, people were paying way over the asking price in order to lock into low rates. Now people are paying under the asking price in order to get into their home. So, you know, there's always a trade-off in every market, but that's the market that we're in right now. We're also going to share with you some links to some overviews of the basic types of mortgages, and also a little bit more information on what Lisa was saying about alternatives to the 20% down rule. So then you've worked all that out, you're ready to buy a home, you've established your team, you know what you can afford. Then we're going to work on your buying strategy. And these are the basic questions you need to ask yourself as you go through. So first of all, what's your timing? You know, if you're not in a rush at all, you have 5 years before you feel like you need to settle down. That's one thing. You might want to start the process now, even if you're planning on buying 5 years from now. Or, you know, let's say you're in the opposite situation where you've just found out that your landlord is selling and you have to move out of your apartment in 3 months. Make sure you share with everybody on your team which of those scenarios you're in. We will build our strategy around that. You've got your budget, and in addition to your budget in terms of your purchase price, one of the things we always look at is to say, what are the other monthly costs? Sometimes you'll see something that has a very low asking price, particularly in Manhattan co-ops, for example, but they'll have a very high monthly maintenance charge. So you really want to lump in to that equation all of your different costs in terms of the home itself. What are your expected utilities? Are you buying a house and you're going to have to be paying, you're going to be paying for your water, you're going to be paying for all of that. So just don't just look at the purchase price. We really want to look at what your monthly cost is going to be as well. And we also want to plan for your future. Are you planning to start a family in this home? Are you planning to get married? Are you going to add or subtract people who are your roommates? Does school district matter to you? Even though we can't really talk or advise about school district, we can give you resources so you can help decide those things. And then also commuting. Commuting was a big deal before the pandemic. And then we went through a period of time where people were really pretty expansive about neighborhoods they were looking in because they were working from home. So they wanted more space for less money. And now we're seeing that pendulum swing. There's a return to office, and convenience and access to transit is becoming increasingly important, and maybe outdoor space is less so. So these things will change over the course of your search, and we're here to go through it with you. And then also just what kind of neighborhood do you want to be in? Do you want to be in a busy neighborhood? Do you want to be in a brownstone neighborhood? Do you want a lot of leafy trees? Are you a park person? Are you a water person? We'll take all of those different considerations we'll take all those different things into consideration. So finding your dream home. We want to set location. Do you already know what neighborhood you want to live in? Are you open to other neighborhoods? Are you neighborhood curious? Really happy to go through that. Type of home, which Rashida will get into a little bit more, a co-op, a condo, a single family, or a multifamily home. Those are the usual cases here. And then what what kind of amenities are you looking for? Do you want a gym in your building? Do you need a washer dryer in your apartment? And please be as specific as you possibly can. We can't necessarily get you everything that's on your wish list, but as we go through this process with you, we will find, and you will find, what your real priorities are. So even if those shift and you started out and you said, oh, I don't really need private outdoor space, and halfway through your search, you realize you absolutely need outdoor space, we're really here to go through the whole process with you, where you decide and change your mind and all of that. So yeah, it's good to narrow it down to 5 deal breakers, and then narrow those 5 deal breakers down to 3. It's all part of that same learning process. So can I throw to you, Rashida, to talk about the different property types?
Sure, yeah, definitely. So you got your pre-approval from your lender, realtors are taking you, your realtor is taking you out. And in New York, there's typically, as a first-time buyer, you're looking at either a house, a co-op, or a condo. House, pretty self-explanatory, 1 to 2 family. Typically, obviously, there's also multifamilies, but for the first-time home buyer, you're probably looking at maybe a 1 to 2 family. And then, of course, in New York, it's one of the few states that we say it's co-ops. So a lot of other states really don't have this thing that they call co-ops, where you are purchasing shares in a corporation. So it's not where you get in a deed, like if you're buying a condo or a house, but you get a stock certificate and a proprietary lease. And additionally, you have to get board approval. And then, of course, there's the condo. You see more condos now because the co-ops were really formed in like the 70s. So you don't see a lot of the new co-ops. You'll see more of the buildings now are condo conversions or condos that they're building. And a condo, similar to a house, you're getting a deed and it's considered real property. And there's different implications depending on the type of property. Your closing costs are much higher when you're looking at a condo and a house, because you have to pay mortgage tax and title insurance, versus a co-op. They don't consider it real property, so you don't have mortgage tax. So a lot of first-time buyers kind of tend to go towards a co-op, because you don't have to put down as much for your closing costs, but most buildings still want you to put down 10%, 20% typically for a co-op. There's a few that will allow 10%. And some, I don't really see them in the city, but in Brooklyn and maybe the Bronx and Queens, you'll see a few buildings that allow 10% down, but the majority want 20% down as far as the amount of your down payment. So you have to get a mortgage of 80% or 80%. But you do find buildings, HDFC buildings, which are income-based. And then, as I said, some other regular other co-ops that may do 10% down. But first-time buyers do tend to deal with co-ops because, as I said, the closing costs are significantly lower than if you're looking at a condo or a house. I don't know if you want to talk about, we'll come back to me in regard to the contract and things like that.
Yeah, we'll come back to you with contract.
Yeah.
And also Benny had a question about the costs associated with refinancing, and I feel like we should get to that sort of towards the end.
Yep.
We will get more into closing costs. So there are closing costs for purchases, and refinancing also has closing costs. So we'll get into those a little bit later. So we are going to be, so you've now decided which types of property. You don't have to settle on just one, which ones you're going to look for. And so now here's how we do our search. So the internet has changed everything about search. It used to be that the brokers had proprietary information and you would have to come to us for it. We love the fact that this has become so much more democratized and that our clients have access to an enormous amount of information. We are members of REBNY, the Real Estate Board of New York, and we are able to share with you the same listings that anybody else who's a member of REBNY. So we're a small boutique, woman-owned, no shareholders. We just work for our clients, but we have the same access to the same listings that Compass or Corcoran or Brown Harris or Element, all of the big companies, we're all part of the same trade association. So there are occasionally some off-market listings, which we get access to. We have really good relationships with other brokers. And once we've narrowed it down to what you're looking for, we will also reach out to brokers who we know may have the property type you're looking for and say, hey, we have a client. Do you have anything else coming up in this building? Or have you heard of something similar to this? And so there's a certain amount of collegiality that is involved in that. But most of the information, those are few and far between. Most of the information that we're getting is information that you can access also online. So that's great. There's less gatekeeping, there's more access, but it also can feel just like a cavalcade of information for you. StreetEasy, Trulia, and Zillow are all one company. They are all, they share a lot of the same information. If you're looking in New York City, we recommend StreetEasy. It used to be, before it was bought by Zillow, it was very buyer friendly. Now they obscure a certain amount of information. For example, if you see a listing and you're interested in going to see it, you click on contact an agent, they will not contact directly the agent who is selling that home. They're instead going to put you in touch with somebody who has given StreetEasy money to be connected to leads. So I don't like that. I don't think it helps anybody, but it is what it is. StreetEasy is free for the user, and it creates an enormous amount of available information for my buyers. And I think it's a trade-off that I'm willing to live with. Also, StreetEasy does have, for the most part, the real carrying costs of those homes. So what their real taxes are, what the real maintenance is. Zillow sometimes just guesses what taxes are. So if you're looking for like, what is this actually going to cost me monthly, StreetEasy is definitely a better site for that. And you can also get into the sort of history of the building, other sales in the building, depending on how nerdy you want to get. Like StreetEasy, you can dig all the way in. So that's pretty fun. I mean, if you go in for that sort of thing, which obviously I do. But we also have our own internal systems. We set up searches for our clients. So search can be really exhausting. Some people really love it and then they get tired of it. But once we know what your search parameters are, we set up searches for those, and we're just going to put them into your inbox when something comes through that is a match. And we can narrow those criteria down as we go. So we tend to start with a pretty wide part of the funnel. And by the time we get closer to making an offer, we're only sending you one new listing a day or a couple new listings a week, because we know we've weeded out everything that we know you're not going to like. But if you want to have the full fire hose all the time, we can also just keep doing it that way. So it's a matter of personal preference. So keep in mind, when you're listing at those listings online, you're going to see the seller's agent info. And sometimes you get excited about it. It's 4 o'clock in the morning. You just want to reach out to that person and bypass your own broker. As I mentioned, sometimes they're going to send you to a completely different third party. And if that third party is a person who ends up setting up a meeting for you with the seller's agent, it may be hard for us as your brokers to reinsert ourselves into the process. So this just happened to me with new clients of mine who said, oops, we accidentally made an appointment, but it's just the first place we're going to see. So I'm sure we're not going to like it. Anyway, they're closing on that next week with the broker who StreetEasy connected them with but I'm really happy for them, because it's a great apartment and they're going to be very happy there. So, but if you do connect directly with a seller's agent, do remind them that you do have a broker representing you. And even if you haven't decided who your broker is, make sure they know that you're leaving that door open, because they do work for the seller, and there is information that they're required not to share with you. And a lot of information that they don't have to share with you. So since we work for our clients are the buyers, our fiduciary interest is to you, and we will represent you and your needs. We also will then help craft a competitive offer strategy for you, which the listing agent is not necessarily the best person for. So we're going to put in another link, which is the condo versus co-op personality quiz. Oh, it's in there already. So that's also really fun too. I think some of these are fun. It isn't all a slog. It can be good. So then we've done our search. We've narrowed everything down. You've gone to see a dozen places. You go to an open house for something that you really love, and you come back and you say, I think this is the one. and here's how we put an offer together. So you already have your pre-approval letter. Let's say you were pre-approved for $700,000 and you went to see something that was only $650,000. Lisa's going to revise your pre-approval letter to come into alignment with the amount of money that you're offering. So never show a pre-approval letter for more than your offer is. Just no matter who you're working with, don't do that. And sometimes people are like, oh, we're busy, just send them what we have. Don't do it. Don't show people that you're willing to, or you're capable of paying more than you're willing to pay. So be ready with that and have an attorney ready. When we submit an offer, if we don't have an attorney's information to submit with the offer, the seller and the seller's agent are not going to take us very seriously. So that's another reason why it's good to get your to interview your interview attorneys ahead of time and have somebody who you can put down on that offer form. But one of the main resources in working with buyer's agents is that we also know those other agents. They trust us. We have great clients, and people really like to work with our people. We like to work with our people. Our clients like to work with our people. And so that's actually an advantage when you're negotiating. Sometimes people think, oh, I should just go in without a broker because then it'll be less expensive for the seller. I represent a lot of sellers as well. And an unrepresented buyer to me feels like, I'm like, oh, I'm just going to have to educate that person about everything in the market. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to get them up to speed in time for them to submit a competitive offer. So I much prefer having somebody come in with a broker representing them when I'm on the sell side of a deal. And that's been my experience with my buyers as well. Like our buyers win bidding wars. They do. And sometimes they win them without the highest offer price because we know how to make them the most attractive buyers for those sellers. So it's a thing, just to like pat ourselves on the back about that. We do pretty well in that. In a competitive market.
Let me just say one thing, if
yeah.
that's okay, and then maybe Rashida, you can talk about like the contract and stuff once the offer is accepted.
Yeah.
But another really important part of the pre-approval process, why some people out there might give you a pre-approval without getting documents from you or running your credit. Honestly, that's a document that means absolutely nothing. And what's really important about me doing all of that work up front is 9 times out of the 10, the seller's agent is going to call me and they're going to say, hey, I have an offer from John Smith. Tell me about the pre-approval. And when I have all of your documents, I can say, yeah, their income looks great. This is what the numbers look like. This is going to be no problem. They have the assets, blah, 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 blah. And 9 times out of 10, that person gets the deal. Because the last thing anyone wants is to accept an offer with financing that then the financing doesn't come through. It's a waste of time for everybody. The sellers are ticked, the buyers are ticked. The whole team is like, why did we even go through this process? So one of the reasons why it's really important to have someone who's doing all of that upfront work is that not only are they making sure that you truly are pre-approved for the place that you want, but also they are putting you in a position to get that offer because you've done the legwork up front.
And Rashida, one of the other, so we've settled on price, but the other really important part of an offer are the rest of your deal terms. So those can include, we want to do an inspection. That inspection then has to happen before you sign the contract, or it usually has to happen before you sign the contract, but nowadays it's almost always has to happen before you sign the contract. Making a deal contingent on that financing. So yes, you're pre-approved for that financing, but if something turns up that means that building can't be financed, those are things you want to cover. And Rashida, can you talk about some other deal terms that we may be presenting to you in our deal sheet?
Yes. So the attorneys, as we come in at once the realtors have basically kind of the framework of that deal sheet. The deal sheet typically has the amount of the offer, whether there's financing involved, if there's any items that are included, all of the attorney's information, if it's a co-op or a condo, the management company's information. And from that deal sheet, the seller's attorney is able to prepare a draft contract of sale. So before you go from your offer's been accepted into contract, a couple of things have to happen. Tina mentioned it a little bit, is an inspection. In New York, you do your inspection prior to you signing the contract. Very important, because one of the terms in your contract is that you're purchasing the property in as-is condition, that you've done your inspection or you waive your inspection. And that's whether it's a co-op, a condo, or a house. That term is all of the contracts. So you definitely want to make sure that you do your inspection. This inspection is done while the attorneys are reviewing the contract, while if you're purchasing a co-op or a condo, your attorney is doing the due diligence, so that time isn't wasted. So things are going on simultaneously from when your offer is accepted until before you sign the contract. The important part of doing that inspection is also if things come up, the terms that things can be negotiated. So if you do your inspection and there's repairs that have to happen, or there's a leak, things like that, or there's expenses that you didn't think about, your agents can go back and renegotiate. They can, maybe a credit, reduction in the price, or for the seller to fix certain items. So those terms are actually updated in the contract of sale, even though the deal sheet had basically that framework. So that's prior to you getting into contract. Also, before getting into contract, some of the things that happen is if you're buying a co-op or a condo, your attorney has to do due diligence review. That's for reviewing the offering plan, the financials, the board meeting minutes. It's like you love physically the property, but you're buying into a corporation or into a condo association, and you want to make sure that they're being run well, or if there's maintenance increases, assessments coming up. All of that happens during that due diligence review prior to you signing. And same thing, if something comes up during that due diligence review, hey, they're about to have a 2-year assessment that's going to be, $7,000. The agents can come back and say, hey, you know what? Let's see if the seller will pay for it, or let's see if the seller will pay for half of it. These are things that can also be renegotiated as part of before you sign the contract. So very important that due diligence review is done. Inspection is done prior to you signing the contract, and these affect some of the terms that were negotiated when your offer was initially accepted. Farah, if you want to go to the next slide, I believe that's the going into.
Yeah.
Yes. So now that your attorney has done the due diligence, you've done your inspection, you love it. The next step is getting you into contract. So going over some things that were on that due diligence. Is there contingencies? Main contingencies in a contract are mortgage. That's why you got that pre-approval. Great. But now the bank actually has to go ahead and do their background, pull the top, do more, get an appraisal on the property. And that due diligence, that contingency in the contract takes roughly about 30 to 45 days. So we want to make sure that you have a contingency if that was part of the negotiation for getting a mortgage. Most of the contracts I see now do have mortgage contingencies. There were a time when people were waiving them, sometimes waiving appraisal contingencies, but it's always important that if something is waived, you have a discussion with your attorney and also with your agent, because you want to understand what the implications of that. But getting you into contract, you want to make sure that's one of the terms that are in there. If that's something that's you are getting a mortgage, is your mortgage contingency. And your attorney's done that due diligence. So you know that the financials, the offering plan, the application, the house rules, all of these things, if you're buying a co-op or a condo, you want to know that you understand those implications. And if you're buying a house, your attorney can look up the property and see what the real estate taxes are. If there's maybe violations on the property, look to see if it's a 1-family or a 2-family. So these are some preliminary due diligence that can happen if you're looking at a house. Once you're in contract, a full title report will be done for houses, which will have more information, but there's certain things that can happen before you get into contract.
And that's our next slide. And so just real quick, Rashida, so between the time when we've negotiated the offer, you have an accepted offer, we send you a deal sheet, to contract signing, what's roughly that time frame?
If you're looking at a co-op or a condo, I would say the due diligence typically takes about a week or two. And it really depends on the building, how quickly we get documents, because co-ops and condos, we have to deal with the management company. And a lot of times they have their own timeframes on responding to questions. Some of them say 5 to 7 business days. So we have to wait until we get that. And then if we're getting the financials and the offering plan. So hopefully you're working with sellers. If you're the buyer's agent, the seller's agent also has to make sure they get these documents out to the attorney. But I would say roughly you're looking at maybe 7 days to hopefully not 2 weeks, but sometimes it can be 2 weeks for that due diligence to happen. For a house, really, it can be, anywhere from a couple of days to a week. And it really, because once you get that inspection done, just waiting for that report to come in, make sure everything is good. Your attorney can review the contract and schedule you for to sign the contract.
Yeah, that's one of the things that's funny about New York is that it's actually easier to buy a house from a paperwork standpoint than it is to buy a condo or a co-op. And during that process between accepted offer and contract signing, we are dedicated to you night and day to get this done. The one thing that's the biggest deal killer in New York is time. So you never want the people on the other side to be waiting for us. We want to be on top of our stuff all the time because an accepted offer has no legal standing. Those folks can still sell that home to anybody else and you have no recourse. The good news is also, if you just change your mind after you've had an accepted offer, you can go walk away and buy something else. And there's no recourse for them either. But that period of time where we're sort of like engaged but not yet married can make you feel really, it's an intense period of time. We always want to be on top of it. We want to be in communication and we want to get that paperwork done as fast as we possibly can, so that when we have it signed and it's in contract, we can send that fully executed contract to Lisa and she can start her underwriting.
And so this is, I think, the prime example of why working with a team who all communicate to each other is really important, because I'm going to totally be in the loop when you have an accepted offer and when you're working on getting the contracts together so that I have everything ready. So as soon as Rashida has fully executed contracts and she sends them to me, we're ready to go. By ready to go, I mean, now this is a live application. So we are getting the appraisal ordered. We are updating anything that needs to be updated to get you into underwriting as quickly as possible. The other really important thing about working with people who work together is, Rashida's going to be doing her due diligence, particularly if it's a co-op. And if she sees something that's a little funky, she's going to call me and be like, hey, this co-op has this for reserves, or this happened last year for the co-op. Is that going to be a problem? And all of those type of things, very rarely is it a problem that I can't overcome, but the earlier I know about it, the better. So this is, I think, where it's really important to work with people who talk to each other and work well together. But anyway, so I'm going to get you through underwriting. This, I think, is one of the places where me and my team just really shine. We're going to get you through underwriting faster than anyone else around. Some banks can take, that whole 30-day mortgage commitment period. We're going to get you through underwriting in probably a week and a half. Usually the longest part is just waiting for the appraisal to come back. So that's really important if you're applying for a co-op, because when you get to the board package, which Tina will talk about in a second, the board will not schedule an interview for you until they have that commitment letter. So the faster you get through the underwriting process, the faster you are able to schedule your board interview. This is also when we're going to be talking about rate, because now is probably, we need to talk, do we lock up front? Do we wait? And that's really a little bit of a dance conversation. If you're buying a co-op, you might not be closing on that co-op for up to 90 days, depending on how the board interview will go and how long they're going to take. So what I always tell you is I will lock you whenever you want, but I want you to understand the risks and the implications you're taking about potentially locking too early or locking too late. So that's sort of a conversation we'll have through that process. And then you will ultimately sort of decide when you're like, okay, let's do it. Let's lock in. I have to leave in a few minutes because I have to relieve my babysitter, but I do just want to answer the question about the refinance real quick, and then you guys can take it from there. For a cost of refinances, New York, another really weird thing New York has is it has what's called the mortgage tax. So you pay a tax on a mortgage when you are purchasing the property. That's actually a very significant part of your closing costs. When you refinance, we can do what's called a SEMA, which basically means you don't pay that mortgage tax again. So, the cost of refinance, the closing costs really depend on what property you're buying, how much you're buying it for, and what the mortgage amount is. But what's really important to know is that probably the biggest part of your closing costs, which is your mortgage tax, will not be paid again when you do a refinance, as long as you do a SEMA, which my bank does them all the time. If you are buying a co-op, then your closing costs are dramatically lower because there is no mortgage tax, because you are buying shares in a property, you're not buying a mortgage. So, all of my borrowers right now that are buying co-ops, they are 100% prepared to refinance as soon as rates go down, because it just makes sense if the savings is there. The last thing I'll just say about refinances is refinancing is very different than buying a home, because really it's a financial equation. So when it comes time to refinance, or when rates are going down, we will have a conversation and I'll just show you the numbers and be like, this is how much you're going to save. These are the closing costs. If the value's in the property, we can roll it in. Do you think it's worth it? And some clients will say, yes, let's do it. And some clients will say, no, that savings of $100 a month is not really worth it right now. Let's wait and see if things go down. Purchase is totally different. You're buying your property, right? So it's just a different sort of framework of thinking about the mortgage process than sort of where you are now. But I have to jump off. You guys can take it from here, and you'll have my contact information. Any questions you have, just shoot me an email. We'll set up a time to talk. And thank you so much. I'll talk to you guys
Thanks,
later. I'm sorry. I
Lisa.
just have to let my
Thanks,
babies
Lisa.
go.
Okay. And then if you are reaching out to Lisa, one of the things I think to talk about too is if you're considering, if you're hoping that rates are going to come down, is to talk to her about adjustable rate mortgages as well. Sometimes adjustable rate mortgages have come with a better introductory rate. That's been less true recently. They're really all over the map. So one of the things that is great about working with a mortgage broker as opposed to just a single bank, which is only offering a limited number of products, is that somebody like Lisa has a mortgage for, self-employed people, has mortgages for people who are using they don't want to show their tax returns. They just want to show their bank statements. There's loans available for everybody. So if you feel like you have a sort of irregular situation, there's a loan for you, unless it doesn't make sense for you. So we've gotten through our due diligence. I know we're sort of breezing through this, but now it's time for, you've got your loan commitment. If you're buying in a co-op, we've done your co-op board package. Whole other conversation. Happy to go through it. Sometimes in condos there are applications as well. It's an unbelievable amount of paperwork, and it will feel like an additional part-time job that you have on top of whatever else you're doing for work during this period of time. But we've made it through, and now it is time to schedule the closing.
Yeah. So it is a lot of information to kind of wrap into an hour. Like each topic can literally be an hour itself. And I know we kind of, with being in contract, just to kind of go over, you're in contract, whether if you're looking at a house, from when you sign the contract and to closing, it's roughly about 60 days. If you're looking at a co-op, it's roughly about 90 days. It can go longer because the co-ops, you have to first get through your mortgage contingency period, which is 30 to 45 days, then submit your application to the board, which may be another week, then wait for an interview for the application to be reviewed, which may be another couple of weeks, 2, 3, 4 weeks sometimes, and then wait for an interview and then clearance to close. So for a co-op, wrap it around that it may be 90 plus days. It can be sooner, but typically 90 days is kind of the norm for a co-op. If you're looking at a house or a condo, you're typically in contract before you get to your closing date for roughly about 60 days. And as the parts are really getting your mortgage, once again, 30 to 45 days, so very important part of it. And then simultaneously for condos and houses, your attorney is getting the title work done from the title company, a search to make sure there's no judgments, liens, any issues with the property itself. That has to be cleared up as well during that 60-day process. And then the bank gives you clearance to close because you got your mortgage, everything looks good with the title. Now we can actually schedule the closing. So roughly a 90-day process once you're in contract. But yeah, it's a lot of different things happen when you're in contract behind the scenes. Your main part of that when you're in contract is really working on your mortgage. In the background, your attorney is working on your the title report, working with the bank attorney, working with the co-op attorney. Your agents are in the background working with you for your co-op application. So it's a lot of things that are happening with that 60-day to 90-day time period. But everything is done, everything's gotten done, everyone's done their part, and now you're at your closing. Your return, the bank has given the green light. You've been approved by the board if it's a co-op. If it's a condo, they've given the waiver, which is a document that is needed for a condominium. Your attorney is the main one that schedules the closing with all the parties. It's a flexible date, so you never want to schedule a mover. You don't want to do anything until your attorney says that you're scheduled a closing. Your attorney will get particular dates from you, your availability, reach out to the other parties to find out their availability, and then send out a confirmation that this is closing on such and such time at a date as well. It's during business hours, so it's not on weekends. Typically, the earliest a closing will be is maybe 10 o'clock if you're getting a mortgage because there's wires that have to be received. And then the latest it may be is 3:30, sometimes later than that, but also because some banks have to get funding approval. So you want to, a closing is typically about 2 hours, an hour and a half to 2 hours, and hopefully not longer, but they do run longer sometimes. But it's a matter of signing all of the documents on that closing table. Prior to you get into the closing, your agents the day before are doing your final walkthrough to make sure that everything is good with the physical aspect of the property as well, so that when you get to the table to sign all those documents and give your money, you know that your plumbing, electrical, everything is still working for when you did that inspection and you made sure everything was working and you understand the condition of the property. Because once you get those keys, you sign those documents, it's yours, and everything is now your responsibility.
Right. If there's a leaky sink, that's now your problem. It's not the landlord's it's not the seller's problem anymore. So, but that is great to go through this walkthrough. And I think it's also just helpful to have these reassurances that we will have written into the contract after the inspection when it turned out that the stove wasn't working, that they were going to replace the stove. And we go in the final walkthrough and make sure that the stove was replaced and that the new stove is working and all of those things. So there's a lot of checks and balances to make sure that you're not being taken advantage of. You just want to make sure the people on your team know to ask for them, because if you don't ask for it, you're not going to get it. And that, I know that was a lot to go through. In conclusion, we do have a lot of resources that we share with our clients. We use Basecamp as a kind of project management software. If you're interested in doing that, some people don't like that, but we'll work with whatever way you like. We have scheduling software. We have a great team of people who will get you into every property you want to see when you want to see it. And but all of those are, we can talk about more. If you're interested in talking to us about buyer brokerage, we'll give you a link to be able to set up an appointment. Although I think that's an appointment with Victoria, who I highly recommend you meet. But you'll also have my email address if you want to reach out to me. And if you want to have a 15-minute chat with, you can schedule some time with Lisa if you want to have some time to go over different mortgage types. And again, we also recommend reaching out to Rashida if you want to have a quick talk about representing you as a buyer. But yeah, there's no strings attached to that, no obligation, no cost. So please do make use of all the resources, the free resources that are available to you, because this city gets better when people are better educated about their options. So please make use of it. And then we can open the chat if anybody has any further questions in addition to that refinancing one. Benny, did you feel that answered your questions about refinancing? I know we breezed through it pretty quickly. When there are those additional closing costs, and so usually you want interest rates to drop a certain amount before the savings make sense, because you will have additional costs when you refinance. So I can't remember what it used to be like. Basically, when interest rates drop a full point, it's usually worth it to refinance. But if it looks like they're going to continue going down, maybe you wait. But and I think if you do have questions you don't want to ask in the chat, please do feel free to reach out to us or any of us, and we will be following up with you're welcome, with a copy of this presentation, our Buying into Brooklyn ebook, and we will send you the links as well. So thanks for joining us. Thanks, Rashida. It's so nice to talk to you in a way that isn't just about a deal.
Yes, you too as well.
And thanks, Farah, for running everything behind the scenes. And thanks to you all for joining us.
Have a great one, everyone.
Take care. Enjoy this beautiful weather.
Yeah.
Bye.